Hey Bass and Bob members, it's Rob here, and Crappie Plus members, here to give you our crappie weekly report, video report, which I wish could be better for you guys, but the crappie fishing for me personally and for most other fishermen has been a little bit tougher as of late. You know, we've had some cold weather move in. Last week these crappie were wanting to get up right on the banks. And this week with this colder weather, it seems like it pulled those crappie back off the banks, and mainly the afternoon bite has not been as good. These crappie, they're still biting, don't get me wrong, but it's more of a morning and an evening feeding frenzy, if you would. You know, the afternoon bite has really slowed down. You know, last week I was catching a lot of good crappie. Consistent bites, and this is reports from other crappie fishermen as well. Just throwing your crappie jigs right on the pea gravel banks and slow rolling it back out to your boat, and within about 3 or 4 reels you got some ticks and you got some bites. Now this week I got out mainly, you know, from I'd say about 10 in the morning until about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and I struggled to catch 4 or 5 crappie every time. And then I hear other guys that really get on them the last hour of daylight. So it's really been tough. These crappie, they want to spawn. You know, some of them have already spawned, but it's just I think this weather has really affected these fish. You know, so my best advice to you Crappie Plus members is to keep doing the same things you're doing, but try to get them early and try to get them late in the evening. Now that could go as far as, you know, fishing the pea gravel pockets, wherever you're familiar with fishing. I mean, the glaze has been really good for crappie fishing. I know the gravoy, way up the gravoy, has been really good for crappie fishing. And even in this mid-lake area from the Toll Bridge to Chimney Cove and to the Bend, if you get in these coves, find the pockets, the pea gravel pockets, and man, just throw your jig out there. The Shadowlicious by Mr. Crappie, the Monkey Shine, has been a real, anything with a chartreuse tail has been really good. Also the 1/16 ounce sickle head with a little spinner on it, those have been really good baits to catch these crappie. But your best bet is to really get after them the first hour of daylight in the morning and the last hour of daylight in the evening.
And Rob, what kind of conditions do you feel would be the more ideal? Because we're going to come into next week. Were you catching them a lot better on sunshiny days and things like that?
Yeah, the sunshiny days were better. These overcast days really haven't worked out for me with the stronger wind. You know, Jack Uxa likes to tell me that these crappie, they don't like the real strong wind. You know, they like to be somewhere, you know, a little bit of chop is fine, but that real strong wind they try to stay out of. So a good warm week would be great for these crappie, you know, so they can continue to do their spawn. They can get all that over with and go about their way. So I would love to see next week, you know, have some warm sunshiny days. Go back to targeting these indentations in the bank.
Tell me about those indentations, Rob. I don't know a whole lot about crappie fishing, but I talked to you and I talked to a lot of crappie fishers. So when you say indentation, I know what an indentation is like. If you got a straight bank and there's an indentation, but is the pea gravel, does it matter what kind of rock?
It really doesn't, but right now they're kind of like the bass, you know, they want that soft pea gravel, you know, to spawn in. So, you know, you could be on the main lake or you could be in a pocket. You know, an indentation could be as big as your kitchen table, you know, if not even a little bit smaller, just a little crinkle in the bank. And sometimes those crappie, they like to group up right in there. And last week I was able to get in those little indentations, mainly on pea gravel, either main lake or in a pocket somewhere, and throw right into that indentation and reel out a few times, and you'd get a bite, and you might catch 3 or 4 crappie in that little hole. Now some guys like to, once they catch one crappie that way, will like to cork. You know, they'll like to put their cork on with their jig on the bottom because they figure there's more crappie there, and they'll sit there and soak the spot, which is smart. But I love slow rolling my crappie jig. I like bringing it back out. I don't really do the corking. I'd like to learn some more. I'm just now still learning a lot about crappie myself, but I'm really intrigued by it. But your best bet, no doubt, is to still target those little indentations. Like I told Bob, it could be the size of a kitchen table, or it could be 20 yards long.
Right.
You know what I mean?
How's the dock shooting? I'll talk about dock fishing in a minute, or ask you about dock fishing in a minute.
Yeah.
How's the dock shooting side of things? Has it kind of been the same thing?
Dock shooting,
You've
yeah.
been out there dock shooting?
Right, yeah. Dock shooting was really good. Like I keep referring to last week, but last week was such a good week to fish for crappie.
Yeah.
And we just had Terry Blankenship over here, probably the best crappie fisherman on the lake, and he said the dock shooting's actually got a little tough for him the past couple days. And we all believe that it's this front, the wind and the cold in the front that's kind of moved through here have really kind of slowed down the bite. But you could still get into your dock shooting. I would still target the docks that sit on pea gravel, softer, smaller rock, and shoot into the darkest holes you could find in that dock. And let maybe a 4 or 5 count, letting that bait fall down, and then slowly start reeling it back out. From what I learned from Terry, he doesn't like to count it down more than 6 seconds once that bait hits the water. And so usually when you dock shoot, you shoot it in that hole, and your line's jumping and already swimming. There's crappie under there. Use your side imaging. If you have side imaging, you could really read if there's crappie underneath that dock. And if you're unfamiliar how to use your side imaging, Terry offers a service where he can take you out and really help you dial in.
We should mention that just for a minute because first of all, Terry took me out and taught me how to use my 360 imaging. And boy, I love that 360 imaging. But the side imaging, he taught me how to really look at that side imaging and actually come right along a dock and see if there's crappie there and see how deep they are. And then he could also see, then he turned on his 360, he can see if those fish are moving. Like he was saying, he'll be dock shooting, but he'll have his 360 going, which is constantly refreshing. And he can see that group of fish after he dock shoots and catches a few of them. He could see that group of fish kind of moving away. It's like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
Right.
Let me ask you just a little bit. Oh, and also I was going to mention that Dave Port, who used to work for Hummingbird and Skeeter Boats, he is now offering. He has a new business called Electronics Institute. I can't remember the whole name. Sorry, Dave, if you're watching.
Something similar to that.
But you can get a flyer if you if you just go search on Dave Port, Poort, on the web, you'll find his website, and he's an expert on graphs as well. And he just started a whole new business, just teaching graphs, both Lowrance, Garmin, as well as Hummingbird. And he's really good with the graphs.
And with those graphs, it's key a lot of times for the crappie. If you really want to dial into a good group and school of crappie and see what you're fishing at, it's just an amazing tool for both crappie and bass fishing to know how to.
But those crappie, you can kind of see them. You
can see them grouped up. You can tell big time, that you got a bunch of them there. Now I wanted to touch a little bit on vertical fishing over brush. Our expert Jim Bierhoff and Wayne Fitzpatrick. They've been able to catch a really good amount of crappie the last hour of daylight the past few days, just vertical fishing for crappie around docks with brush underneath it from anywhere from 25 feet to 10 feet. So if you live in an area where that there's brush submerged underneath or around docks, that last hour of the day has been the best bite on this lake.
And what have they been catching them on, Rob?
They drop down. Oh God, I can't think of the name of it, but it's just I think it's a Johnson tube, a little Johnson tube that's pink with a chartreuse tail. And Jim likes to just drop it straight down. Once he feels his brush, he just holds it still. And if you're not getting any bites holding it still, give it a slow reel. And just when you think you're reeling it too slow, reel it even slower, because that's just a ticket.
Now, do you have to feel the brush or know you're right on the top of the brush?
Yeah, it's always good to know your depths of your brush.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
right,
You want to get that bait as close to the brush as you can. Yeah, you might get some hang-ups, but you know, it's really worth it. It really pays off, you know. So the vertical fishing is still there, but
it's been certain times of the day.
It's been certain times of the day. It's really a morning and evening thing, and I really think the weather has to do a lot with what it has.
Now, as we go into next week, if it seems like if we continue with the same weather pattern where we got cloudy skies and wind, a little bit chillier weather, everything you're describing, the pea gravel pockets, the vertical fishing, you know, figure out what depths are at,
right.
Early morning, late day. Any sense for how that might change? We get a good sunny day.
Right.
What kind of
I
things
think if
would
we
you
get
think
a
about?
good sunny day, which I wanted to touch on this, I'm glad you mentioned that. You know, these fish, they were right on the bank. You know what I mean? And with this colder weather, you know, they actually, I've had reports. I couldn't do it because I was too stubborn. I was like, any minute now, I'm going to catch them right on the bank.
Right.
But these fish, you know, they're still there. They just pulled off a little deeper.
Yeah.
So you got to get your bait a little deeper. You know what I mean? You gotta maybe even slow roll it even slower back to the boat, but maybe come off the bank, not where you're reaching the bank every cast with this cooler weather, but maybe throw about 4 or 5 feet in front of the bank and just work your depths a little deeper.
Now, what would you do if it was sunny?
Right. If it gets warmer in a nice sunny day, I'm not gonna say it's gonna happen on the first sunny day, because it might take some time for this water to warm up. I think water temperature is huge for both bass and crappie fishing.
Yeah. Needs to be warming.
Warming.
Right now it's cooling.
It's kind of cooling. If we get a couple warm sunny days, it's gonna move these crappie right back to where they should have been.
Yeah.
You know, to continue their spawn and continue what they do.
So what would you do? A little closer to the bank, still the pea gravel pockets?
Definitely.
What about your baits? The ones with the little spinner thing on it?
Yes, I've been getting so many good bites on that sickle head 16th ounce spinner crappie jig with the Shadowlicious, Monkey Shine, or any kind of swim jig that has a chartreuse tail. Has really been getting bit well, and that's not only coming from me, that's coming from many crappie fishermen that I talk to.
Yeah.
So look forward to hopefully this water warming back up and being able to just
work
these banks all day long like we were able to last week. But if we get the same kind of conditions, guys, really try to key in on the early morning and the late afternoon.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just been where, you know, I've worked in the morning and work in the evening, so I only get to fish during, you know, that time of day where it's, you know, 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock in the afternoon into about 3 o'clock. And that's kind of been the tougher time. And then I have guys that come up to Fitz Fishing where I also work part-time telling me that, oh man, they were on in the morning, and then during the midday I couldn't even get a bite. And then in the evening I was able to limit out in an hour. So really pay attention to that. And if you are fishing during the midday and it's cool water temperatures in the 50s, not much sun, work that bait a little deeper and a little slower off the bank, and then resort. I would definitely try your deeper brush, you know, maybe 15 to 20 foot deep at the most, and just work all the elements, and hopefully you come across a bite. But don't rule out dock shooting also. Dock shooting has still been somewhat good. It's slowed down a little bit, but dock shooting is still very good. And the docks that I would key on would definitely be on the shoulders of secondary points. You know, you got your secondary point, and you got a dock that usually sits on each shoulder, you know, and goes back. I would work that whole strand of docks, just shooting in the darkest holes, darkest corners, darkest spots you could find to get that bait into, and be ready, because that line's going to jump.
Yeah.
But that's the best advice I could give to you guys.
Rob, so that's crappie and crappie plus other species. Have you heard anything about catfish?
Well, I haven't heard much about the catfish, but I know that the jugging has been good. You know what I mean? I could always, I mean, I know jugging's jugging. I haven't heard many guys talking about the rod and reel catfish, but I know that, you know, you go put your jug out there, your jug lines in about, you know, 30, I would say 30 foot of water. And I'm going to have a video with Jim Bierhoff here really soon up on the site for you guys. He he gets like this cement. He pours like some cement in like a bucket.
Yeah.
And then he runs his line from that bucket all the way up top to the jug. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And he has 4 or 5 or 6 hooks on it,
Yeah.
baited with shad or bluegill, and you know, and he seems to get a catfish on his jug at
Big
least
ones, too.
I mean, up to 40 pounders.
Those big blues.
All the way down to 16 inches. You know.
Any idea? I guess I have to wait for the video to come
Yeah,
and watch
yeah.
it. You know,
Stay
but
tuned.
How does he know what depth to put that concrete at versus where his jug is?
He just
Does he drops it all the way down and then he puts the jug on?
he measures it. You know,
Okay. Yeah.
you know your depth. If you got graphs and stuff
Right.
like that, you could read your depth, and just stay tuned for that video.
Okay, that's
you know what I
cool.
mean,
That's
because
cool.
I don't want to give it away at all, because it's going to be such a great video that we're going to
Yeah.
do with Jim here, and
And
we'll
that's a
teach
good way
you.
to catch the catfish right
Oh,
now.
oh,
Now,
yeah.
working at the bait shop, have you had people coming in looking for shad sides? I know Wayne sells, you know,
Shad.
whole frozen shad.
Yeah, I did
Stuff
have
like
a
that.
I did have a guy buy some of that today, and
Yeah.
that has been picking up.
Yeah.
I just need to get some more information on what the catfish guys are doing.
Right.
But the best way I've heard recently from not only Stoner,
Yeah.
Greg Stoner, who's the biologist, conservation biologist down here, and Jim and Wayne, that jug fishing's been solid. You
Yeah.
know, they've been able to get, you know, decent fish on their jugs at least once or twice a week, or
They
you
set
know,
them out there kind of in there, like, they set them
on
out
a secondary point.
on the secondary point, kind of right where that secondary point kind of hits that, right where it hits that kind of creek channel that's coming out type of thing.
You're
So,
exactly
okay.
right. You're
Yeah.
exactly right. You want to be in that channel, because you know those catfish, they like to be in that channel.
Yeah.
So if you got a secondary point, you know, come off that secondary point and do about 30 foot of water, set your jug line, and I promise you, you'll get some catfish to bite on it. Use cut up bluegill or a whole bluegill. You
Yeah.
could even do that, or you could come into Fitz Fishing and buy the full shad, or you could buy shad sides that's already cut up shad, and that's been a good way to catch the catfish.
And then I got a report from Tricia from Missouri Department of Conservation on the paddlefish. You know, we're still in the snagging season until I guess maybe about another week or so.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're getting them pretty good up the river, up the Osage. But I think I might have mentioned this last week, is that one of the things, if you're not getting bit, you know, usually the paddlefish snagging, they're doing that right in the main channel, you know. But the paddlefish, they also want, just like all the rest of the species, it's the springtime and they're wanting to go spawn. And so they run up the river channels, in particular up the river, you know, from, I mean, you can fish them, you catch them in Niagara, up the Glaze even, but mostly it's up the Osage, you know, from the 50-mile marker all the way to the dam. And one of the things that Tricia mentioned is that because now we're a month or so into it, or a month and a half into it now, is that some of those fish are getting tired of getting donked on the head with these big old waves.
Right.
And so she suggests that in addition to fishing the channel, you know, the main river channel, is to fish off to the sides of the main river channel, because as most of you snaggers actually know, you may have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 boats just in a row, and everybody's throwing into that channel. And so what she indicated was those fish will kind of start moving off to the sides of the channel a little bit, just to get out of the way of all that stuff coming at them. And so you might try, you know, give that a try. And she also said that, you know, now they're starting to move up, so probably even the farther up you go, the better you're going to be, meaning from the 50 to the 90-mile mark,
Right.
which I know that's a long stretch for a lot of people.
Right.
But because they're trying to get up a creek, you know, they're trying to get up the river channel to go do what nature says for them to do to spawn. And they do have some concerns, though, that because after the building of Truman Dam, they can't go any farther. And so, you know, there's the tagging program right now, which, you know, if you catch one that's tagged, there's a phone number, call Missouri Department of Conservation, tell them about it, because they're really trying to understand whether or not there's natural spawning going on or not, and how far these fish are actually moving, because they feel like Truman Dam has kind of got in the way of them really getting all the way up the river to where they spawn. And thus, you know, right now they actually stock paddlefish, and they actually take some of these fish out. You know, they actually use nets. Is that right? Yeah, they use nets. And they net them, and then they take the eggs and they take the sperm and they go to a hatchery and
Yeah, and
do their, you know, mix it all up and do their magic, you know, and.
I did want to touch on one thing. I did have a guy come into Fitz's today who's a local snagger who said that he's been doing pretty well, him and a couple of his buddies, and he noticed when they were running water, believe it or not, when they were running water, the snagging was good. You know, they were able to catch a couple fish, a couple spoonbill, but as soon as they shut the water off, it's like, where'd the spoonbill go? So that's from a local guy who comes in the shop quite a bit. And so pay attention to the running of the water, you know, from Ameren. So supposedly that's kind of been a key for him lately on how successful he is.
Cool.
One more thing on the crappie. I have got reports from up the river. Of course, it really hasn't changed like in the area of the lakes that I've been crappie fishing. You know, I mainly crappie fish from the glaze to the dam. Now, guys that are up, you know, in the 50-mile marker to, you know, to Truman Dam, I guess, have still been catching them consistently throughout the day. So if you live up that way, you're blessed.
Okay,
you know,
so maybe a little bit better bite in these kind of conditions in the river
because
areas.
the water, I think, is still warm, and it really hasn't affected them as much as what it has down here.
Well, that should translate also then, because it's fairly typical, translate to the very upper reaches of the Gravois, the Glaze,
way up the Glaze,
even in the upper ends of the Lynn Creek and stuff like that, you know.
Right, and that's something I'm definitely going to check out early next week, because I've been fishing a lot in the mouth of the Glaze, pretty much. You know, what would you say, the 1 to the 3 mile marker. So next week I would like, especially if this weather stays the same, I think I'm going to venture up a little bit further and see if I can catch these crappie consistently throughout the day.
Yeah,
you
good.
know?
Okay. Good stuff, Rob. Thanks, Passing By members, and we will catch you next week.
Thank you, guys.